Ashley, and probably the best mother in our household. I'm kidding. She may. I don't know if there's a competition here, but she's probably the best mother. Just saying. So Ashley, wherever you are, why don't you come on in and give the kids and Ashley a warm welcome.
Be driving kids to practice when she comes, honk, honk. She'll be driving kids to practice when she comes, honk, honk. She'll be driving kids to practice, she'll be driving kids to practice, she'll be driving kids to practice when she comes, honk, honk. She'll be doing lots of laundry when she comes, P-U. She'll be doing lots of laundry when she comes, P-U. She'll be doing lots of laundry, she'll be doing lots of laundry, she'll be doing lots of laundry when she comes, P-U. She'll be baking yummy cookies when she comes, yum, yum. She'll be baking yummy cookies when she comes, yum, yum. She'll be baking yummy cookies, she'll be baking yummy cookies, she'll be baking yummy cookies when she comes, yum, yum. She'll be doing lots of shopping when she comes, Walmart. She'll be doing lots of shopping when she comes, Walmart. She'll be doing lots of shopping, she'll be doing lots of shopping, she'll be doing lots of shopping when she comes, Walmart. Okay, let's get ready for our cheer. Okay. Go ahead in front of the chair. Okay. Are you guys ready? Yeah. Okay. Give me an M. M. Give me an O. O. Outstanding. Give me a T. T. Terrific. Give me an H. H. Happy. Give me an E. E. Excellent. Give me an R. R. Responsible. What have you got? Mother. Say it again. Mother. Louder. Mother. Raw, raw, raw. Okay, set it down.
Has this ever happened to you?
Jeremy, you get down here now. This broccoli is not going to eat itself. Get down here right now. I'm going to give you to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it, young man. No video games for you tonight.
Really annoying, isn't it? But you know something? Moms have been doing this to their kids for centuries. In the Old West, moms sounded like this.
Billy Joe, you hustle down here now. These ain't gonna eat themselves. Get down here right now. I'm gonna give you to the count of 3. 1, crooked number 3. That's it. You ain't going to the rodeo tonight.
In ancient Rome, when people still used letters for numbers, Mom were actually a little more patient.
Claudius, come through in here now. This castor salad is not going to eat itself. Get us though in here now. I shall give you to the count of 3. I, V, V. That's it. No fights for you tonight.
On the other hand, moms in ancient Japan, the lands of ninjas and samurai warriors were not so patient.
Grasshopper, you have not eaten your fried rice. You will eat it now. Hi-ya!
Yes, moms have been trying to get their kids to eat right for a long time, but with good reason. They want us to eat well. They want us to be responsible. And they want us to be good, loving people. Moms don't nag us because they like it. They do it because they love us. Ninja moms love their kids.
Grasshopper, mother loves you.
Moms from Rome love their kids.
I love you, my little empire.
They loved them in the Old West.
I love you, Buckaroo.
And even today, moms love their kids.
I love you, Jeremy, and that was very sweet, but you're still not playing video games until you eat your broccoli.
Come on!
Give it up for our kids one more time for all their hard work. Excellent. Well, before we dismiss the kids and take up our offering, we have a couple gifts that we have for some special moms in the room. Now, you're all special, but what the definition of special is different than the rest, right? So you can't all be special and in this way. So please don't take offense, but we're going to have a couple gifts for these particular special moms. So if you're in the room, sorry, those online, but those in the room, if you are the oldest mom in here, we have a special gift for you. Now, I'm not going to call you out your age, but let's say if you're over 60 and you're a mom and your oldest kid, does their kid have to be in attendance? No. Okay. If you're an oldest mom in general. So if you're over 60, go ahead and stand up and your mom. I just want to recognize you first off the bat. You're awesome. Give it up for them. All right. All right. So out of these four, how do we do this? Like their oldest child or their age? Their oldest. The longest mom, right, would be what? They have the oldest child. All right. So over here, what is your oldest child age? So we got a 48. All right. Good job. Okay. That's fine. All right. So if you have somebody that's older than that. Over here, what is your oldest child? Jenny, yes. 55. Okay. Now I feel bad. Okay. The other ones, I don't know your name. What? Connie. Okay. What is your oldest child? How old? 44. That's pretty awesome. And over here, Sue, the oldest child is? 54. Wow. So close. All right, good job. You guys are so special, but Jenny, you're the specialist of them all. So, all right. Now, we're going to go with the youngest mom. Now, this would be the youngest child or the youngest age? Youngest age? All right, hold on. The youngest age of the child? Okay, we're going to go with the age of the mom, so you may not win out on this. So if you're, let's say, is there anybody who's 30 and under that is a mom? We'll start there. Over here, you may be the only one. All right, this is easy, so give it up. All right, awesome. It's much easier when there's one special one, but you're all special, especially my wife. She is the most special. All right, Mom, if you're watching too, you're the most special too. All right, now the last one we have is for the most kids, and I believe it's here that you brought the most kids. Mom, all right, so we'll go over or three. If you have three or over, if you would stand up and you're a mom. All right, awesome. We got two. Okay, how many kids? 3. All right, how many kids? 5. And you have 3. Okay, you are standing too. So we got 3, and 5. So, all right, Brandy, wonderful. All right, that is fun. We're going to do this again for Father's Day. So now you know the parameters for special fatherhood. Is there? There is. Yeah, you're wondering, what are these for? Well, afterwards, your mother, you can grab these. This is our gift for you. And if your mom is not here and you'd want to bring one to her, I will say yes to that. So, all right. So one thing I want to bring your attention to before we before we get to the offering is we have an opportunity to partner with our local pregnancy center in Portage, Pregnancy Resource Center, and this is something that Sue volunteers for. And so Sue Stilson, she has a booth out there in the lobby. I'd encourage you to stop by there. You pick up a pamphlet to find out more information about what they do. It's great to see what's being done in our county. You'll also see an empty bottle, and that's not just to take to fill it up for your kid. This is something we're going to fill up with change, and then we're encouraging you to bring those back on Father's Day, and we're going to send all that money to help the Pregnancy Resource Center and what they do in helping people to choose life and encouraging mothers to keep their children and raise their children and giving them resources that they need. I hope that covers it. This pamphlet is probably got a lot more information. And Sue, ask her billions of questions, put her on the spot, and let's make sure that this gets the resources that they need. Amen? All right. Well, for our offering, if you have brought your offering at some point during the service, you can put that offering in the giving box in the back of the sanctuary. We also have an opportunity to give online, familylifecenter.us/giving. You can text to give at 84321, and you can also give through our Church Center app. With that, kids, you can be dismissed. We love you, but we got something else planned, and we'll go ahead and get into our message. Allow me to get situated here. All right. Well, adults, we are going to get into our sermon today, and just want to say again, Happy Mother's Day to all of our wonderful moms out there, and especially my own. We had a chance to FaceTime them yesterday. She has a new haircut, looks great. But thank you, Mom, for bringing me into the world, but also my siblings and taking care of us, making sure we don't get... Well, I did get ran over on my bike, Mom. Where were you for that? But I was going to say that. But no, thank you for keeping me safe, protecting me, and helping me get here. So definitely want to say thank you to all of our moms. Now, as we continue our series Between Two Trees and our study of trees in the Bible, thank you, we are going to talk about two women today and their relation to our series Between Two Trees. Now, one of these is a mother named Jochebed, and another one is actually not a mom. She's an orphan named Esther, but she had a pretty important role. So while today is special because of mothers, it really is something that is special for all women because they have a unique purpose and that they can bring forth life. And so it's pretty awesome. So we want to recognize mothers, of course, but today's going to be more general too, to all women and then all of us. I'm not going to leave anybody out today, okay? Now, in the Bible, there's lots of women that we could talk about and their character and the importance, both in their motherly role, but also in their general purpose. But you look through the Bible, it's full of women that kind of stand out in the Bible. You can talk about Adam, and you can't have Adam without Eve. Now, Eve may not be the best role model for mothers and women. She obviously ate the fruit, and then now we're all in this. But she also gave it to Adam, so maybe she isn't the best one. But let's start with another one. Okay, what about Jesus? You can't have Jesus without Mary. Okay, there we go. Now we're on a roll. That's where we really need to look, bud. But for today, our message is titled, "You Were Made for This." Now, if you have somebody around you, or you can talk to the air, that's fine too. But tell somebody, you were made for this. Go ahead. You were made for this. 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 Somebody needs to hear this. You were made for this. This life, the things that are going on, you were made for this. Now, mothers, you were not made to do everything. I know that it's kind of a joke, but you weren't. You were not made to do everything. Women, you were made for something more than the roles that you play. Who calls you mom? Or for Esther, who calls you queen? It's more than the roles that you play. You were made for this. Now, this Mother's Day is a little bit different for me because now I am a father to our little daughter, Lena. And to her, as I was preparing for this message, I was realizing, we're raising a daughter, but she's going to have many roles throughout time, okay? She may be a mom one day. She may be a spouse. She may be a grandmother. Who knows the roles that she'll play in the family, but also in society, the things that she'll do. And so as I was thinking about this message and how it relates to our series, this phrase, you were made for this, is something that I felt that I would want to share with my little daughter as well with all women for Mother's Day. And it ties into a verse that Ashley and I were talking about one day as we were preparing Lena's room. And it was during one night where we were discussing, why would we want to bring a child into all of this? 2020 was a year for the records, but with the pandemic going on and just all the strife and conflict, it's like, man, why would you want to build a family during this time? And this is where God laid the verse on our heart. Perhaps you were made for this. And so we talked to a friend who is creative, and they made a little canvas that with painted words, you were made, or perhaps you were made for this, and it's in her room. So that's kind of for us as we were preparing for Lena to come into our life. We felt like, we can't control all the stuff out there, but perhaps, God has a plan in this and for this time for her. And it's inspired from Mordecai's speech to Esther in Esther chapter 4, verse 14, where he says, "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." He's seeing all the events that are transpiring. I'm not saying God's causing all the trouble and all the bad things, but he's saying God can use that. He can repurpose that. And perhaps in God's plan, you were made for this. Now, this is pretty vague, but it includes a lot in life. It's ups and it's downs, it's highlights and disappointments, it's tragedies and triumphs. It includes a lot, but you were made for this. Now, we don't get to define for our little girl all the things that she's going to experience. I don't get to protect her from everything that might come her way, all the trouble that this world may prepare. And as we were trying to grapple with bringing a daughter into this kind of pandemic atmosphere, what we realize is that, no, God has a plan in this. God has prepared her for this time and for this part of all the seasons of life. Now, we're learning through this season, perhaps in any other season, to redefine our trouble, to not see it as just like a frustration of, oh man, the cars broke down. Like I was driving my truck the other day and there's a rattle, and my truck is so rusty, it's like, what else is falling off, right? But it's like those things, the sump pump a couple weeks ago. So it's like things like that. I'm like, it's just a frustration, when you have trouble like that. But what if the whole world is at trouble? That's something that can be overwhelming. And so we're learning in this time more than any others to redefine our troubles and say, perhaps you were born for this. Perhaps you were made for this. And this, it includes trouble. So this is the big idea today, and it's kind of tying in from last week where we talked a lot about trouble. But the idea is this, is that you can either define your trouble or be defined by your trouble. I'll say that again because it is really important to distinguish this. You can either define your trouble, say this is what my trouble is, or be defined by your trouble. Now, how many of you guys know it's easy to define ourselves by what's happened to us? We can go through our life and just look at all these events and think of ourselves more as a victim, as somebody that the world has brought so much trouble on. But it's important for us to redefine that and say, no, I'm not defined by what has happened to me. I'm defined by what God has brought me through, okay? He is bringing me through, and I have to begin to see your trouble differently. So that's the big idea today, okay? Now for us, this hits home because part of becoming adoptive parents required some trouble. It required for us 2 miscarriages. Now, maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't know that. We don't talk about it a whole lot, and it's awkward talking about that on Mother's Day, I know. But it's part of our story. So for us to define our trouble, I have to share what that trouble was. Now, we would not have been moved like we were moved to do foster care ministry if it hadn't been for that trouble that was brought on our life. We were disappointed at the time. We couldn't see God's plan. And I would say, so far as to say, our souls were crushed. We were bitter. I don't know, just bitter at God, but just like bitter about that, because it's a painful thing for those that have been through that. And especially bitter because the ultrasound technician, it's just like when they say there's no life in your wife's womb, it's really hard to take that. And it's hard to just move on from that, okay? So we experienced some trouble back then. And we could have easily defined our trouble as our life story of almost like, of course this happens to me. Of course this happens to us. Or we deserve this, all that stuff. Now, we could have easily done that, but perhaps this event, more than any others, helped us to regroup. And I know for many, they silently carry these pains and they don't share this, and that could have easily been us too. But God had other plans, and God, He specializes in redefining our past troubles. He can take something like that, and although it was bad, He can bring purpose out of it that we would have never intended or planned. We just couldn't have planned that. Another little tidbit about me that I don't know if I share a lot, but I have a scrapbook. I haven't brought it today, but I have a scrapbook from a season of my life that I was in foster care. Now, I was in foster care for 6 months, at the age of 6 months, after a pretty bad car wreck that my mom, myself, and my 2-year-old at the time sister, we were all involved in a car wreck. And a lady ran a red light, hit my mom on the side, and so she sustained a lot of injuries that required her to be hospitalized for 3 to 6 months while she learned to walk, talk, to write, all those things that you take for granted. She had to relearn that stuff. And my dad, he had to work. Go figure. I don't know where the government was at that time, but he had to work. And take care of my sister and my older brother as well. So I was in this foster family. And this foster family, this book, is full of love, smiles. It had 3 teenage daughters, and they wrote little things in that little scrapbook, of all the things my mom missed, And so I don't know what all those big steps were, but that's a part of my story, and I kind of just buried that and moved on with my life. I was 6 months at the time. Yes, I was in a car wreck, but I wasn't the one who sustained injuries. My mom did. And so to my mom and to my family, they had to go through a lot. And so it was a huge, huge support that this family took me in at that young age. And so all this leads to this little tidbit kind of rose to the surface when I was at Phoenix, Arizona, and it was following one of our miscarriages, and I was just beginning to kind of heal from that. And so we went to Phoenix, Arizona, pastor and I, and we had there was a pastor's school conference there. And one of the nights they had a drama that included this need for foster families in churches. And I remember watching this drama, and they're painting the need out there for families to bring in children. And I was like really drawn to that. I was like, yeah, that could be us. Maybe one day we'll be foster parents. That would, I'll talk to Ashley about that someday. Well, I forgot about that because when we got home, we had another one, okay? And then it was just like our whole world just kind of shut down. I didn't think about anything. I didn't think about this conference that we went to. I didn't think about the need. It wasn't until, you'll have to talk to Ashley. She's more clear on details. But we got a flyer in the mail from a local foster care ministry called White's Residential and Family Services. And then it kind of rose to the surface. I'm like, yeah, they did this drama about foster care ministry. And my wife, of all people, is like, we need to do this. I was like, it kind of brought us into something that totally took us by surprise. Wasn't what we were planning. Wasn't even like on our radar. But I think adoption from a young age, like teenagers, both of us kind of wanted to adopt. But foster care, it brought on this trouble. We had troubled kids from troubled homes, and it brought a lot of trouble into our home and into our church. Not a lot of people were happy. They're like, yeah, you're taking care of kids. They didn't see that cause. They saw it as a problem. They saw troubled people as a problem. And that troubles me. It troubles my heart because I knew how much I benefited from that, even though I wasn't there as a 6-month-old. it's one of those things. It would be nice to have. So all of this stuff in my story began to kind of be redefined as God used my trouble and began to bring purpose to it. Now, your trouble's not going to be my trouble, and our stories are not going to be similar, but I think you can look back and look at some things that they weren't so good at the time, but if it wasn't for those things, you probably wouldn't have taken the path that you took, and that God has had a hand in helping you to come back from those troubles. Am I talking to anybody today? Okay, I think that there are some people here that you've had some trouble, but God is saying to you today, you were made for this. In fact, I only have 2 points today. The first one's about Moses, and the second one's about Esther. The first point is this: Moses was made for this trouble. Now, I talked a lot about this last week. You can review that if you'd like, if you missed it. But he was made for trouble, and there's a lot of trouble that he went through. And it started at his infancy. It started at the very beginning, things he couldn't control. And we see this in Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "Now a man from the house of Levi went and took a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was good, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could not hide him, or when she could hide him no longer, she got him an ark of reeds and covered it over with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile." Now, I want you to see this, and I want you to understand this is a desperate mother. This is not a good mother, okay? I'm not making that out of this. Jochebed is her name, and she's not a good mother. She's a desperate mother who does something very desperate in faith and belief that God would do something if she trusted in him. So, like Noah, she put this baby in an ark. And we see kind of Moses as a new Noah. She puts this baby almost like a seed in the ark and floats it on the water and kind of places him there. Now, Moses' mother, I said, is Jochebed. And we see that like Abraham, she had to make a decision, a desperate decision, to either wait for trouble to come find her and the boy, or to trust God to find this boy. And it's at this moment that this boy we're given no name and no clear destiny, just another child. And he's just one of many Israelite boys that is being put to death, or in danger of being put to death because of overpopularization. Now you say, that's such a barbaric society. Who would kill their children? I mean, who would kill thousands and thousands of boys just because of overpopulation and to control a people group? Well, that is still something that is done today. It's not necessarily a government-issued thing, but we see people making these choices, and as people, and you add them all together, it does have a massive, massive impact. And so we see this, that he's kind of caught as many among the many boys that are being put to death. And so she knows that this is maybe going to be the outcome anyways, and so she puts them in an ark of kind of protected, so he's not maybe going to drown, but he may just sit there in this water. She has no guarantee that this is going to work, but she's trusting. She's trusting him. So she almost like builds kind of like an altar and lays her child in, like Abraham laid Isaac on the altar, and she's giving him to this troubled water and to this troubled world, and basically asking God to do something with this situation. Now, none of us really can identify with this kind of desperate act, but there are tons of desperate mothers out there, and they're doing some pretty horrible, desperate things. Now, it may not be putting them on the water, but it may be some other things. But we need to sympathize and empathize with mothers that are in these desperate situations. So she makes a choice to enter the troubled waters of uncertainty, and she gives up control of her situation and allows this son to either die at the hands of fate, or if that's what God allows, or to understand that God can maybe do something that's impossible with man. Now, can you hear this child, okay? This is a 3-month infant placed in a hidden, kind of from view, but can you hear this child? I mean, 3-month-olds are not quiet, are they? They're not. I mean, I can sleep through a lot. I just sleep. That's what you put me in the bed and I sleep. But I can hear a 3-month-old infant's cry if it gets severe enough. So this baby is hidden from view, and he's crying out And it's something that you just can't possibly ignore if you're in the area. Now, this is where we see providence. This is where we see God working behind the scenes, because it's not just anybody that's around. It's the person that it needed to find this child. And this kind of reminds me of him being hidden in the reeds. It reminds me of back in the Garden of Eden. And we see that after they had eaten from the forbidden tree, they went and they hid in the trees. And we see that God goes and he finds them. I really believe that God is pursuing, God is finding, God is rescuing. And we see that with Adam and Eve, that he was going to find them, not to punish them, but to find them. They were lost. We also see a tie-in with Abraham when he was told not to sacrifice his son as he was about to do the final act on the altar there. And he turns around and he sees a ram in the thicket, and he understands that God provides. God always provides. We may not understand his plan, but we understand that he has a way. He finds a way to provide for the things that we lack. And so we see by providence that Pharaoh's daughter comes upon this child. I mean, out of everybody, she's the one that hears the cry. And I think all of us can hear that cry. It may not be this infant. It may be something else, that cry of purpose that says, I need to do this. I'm the one that needs to do this. This is my purpose. This is my call from God. So verse 5, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She shows him mercy and pity. And this is such an odd hero story, isn't it? I mean, we know Moses as the one who led the Israelites, from the waters or through the waters of the Red Sea. He's the lawgiver, and we see him in the wilderness leading the people. But he gets his start as completely dependent. I mean, just an innocent boy that's in the river. I mean, nobody really expects anything. He has no real purpose or life or destiny that we know of. No name. He's just a child. And so God knows how to find you in troubled waters. If you find yourself in a troubling place today, know that God knows how to find you. He knows just the right person that will see you on the side of the road when your car breaks down. I mean, I've heard countless stories of that when you call on God and you look for him for the provision, he provides. He is working behind the scenes. And like Moses, you were made for this trouble. This was a huge part of his story. Now in verse 10, she named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. And little did she know, she gave him his destiny right here by giving him this name. That she not only drew him out of the water, but he also would draw his people out from Egypt and into the promised land, or to the promised land. So God knows how to find you, amen? And you were made for this trouble. Now I want to turn to another character here, and this one's a little bit different. She had some trouble, but hers wasn't so much that she was made for trouble. She was made for this threat. And her character's name is Esther. Esther was made for this threat. And I'm here to tell somebody that you were made for this threat. How many of you guys know we are under some serious threat? It just seems everywhere we go, there's something that's threatening to pull you under. There's something that's threatening to take you out. And it always seems like it's coming out of nowhere, and you just know that it's there, and you're trying to protect yourself from those things. But God knows that you were made for this threat, and God has a way of making you to be prepared for the things that are coming, the things you don't know about. So this is where we get to Esther. Now we know Esther is Queen Esther, but Esther, in the book of Esther, there's some things that are missing, and that's kind of what's significant about this book. It's not so much its contents, but the things that are missing. I'll just mention 4 things that are missing that I noticed. Now, the first thing that's missing is a promised seed. Now, Genesis 3:17 talks about a promised seed that would come and it would crush the enemy. And we know Jesus as the eventual promised seed. But every heroic story throughout the Old Testament, it has this kind of continuing story that there is this seed. Okay, and so everything's kind of being passed down from descendant to descendant. And finally you get to Jesus. And after Jesus, there is no more. It's just he is the new tree of life, the new promise, the promised seed. So we notice, though, that there's a seed missing. It's not really a central figure that is a man. It's actually a woman, which is significant. that she is the heroic person in this story. And she doesn't have a tie-in to Jesus' lineage. You won't find her listed among the genealogy. In fact, it doesn't say that she really has any children, or they're not marked in some sort of geology. Okay? Or not geology. Is that geology? Maybe it is. Genealogy, Okay, good. Somebody, I'm like, that didn't sound right. All right, so she doesn't have a tie-in. She's just, you kind of notice something missing. We also there's a family tree that is missing. There's parents that are mentioned, but she's actually an orphan, and she's adopted by her uncle Mordecai. Now she's got no genealogy, and it's kind of this really unusual person that is here. It's just a child that came from somewhere, but has no connection with the big narrative. Okay, she is kind of like compared to like as a leaf to an oak tree. Okay, she's not an acorn, but she's kind of a leaf. She's there, pretty important character, but she's not going to produce more in this tree, so to speak. The third thing I notice is character is missing. I mean, she's not overtly righteous, or you can't really see that they're making the case that it's because of her righteousness that she is getting promoted. Actually, you look at this story, and it's her beauty that is her promotion. And that's like horrible to say, because women already feel like they got to be beautiful in order to be accepted and liked. Okay, well, that's the case in this, though. Her beauty is what makes her stand out, and that makes her actually get promoted. And so we notice that her character is missing. It's not the reason that she's being elevated in these positions. She is actually unique in that she's beautiful and attractive, and the Bible's okay with that. Okay, the Bible's saying that is a part of this. But her character's still there, and we're going to get back to that a little bit later. But the biggest thing that's missing is the name of God. God is missing throughout these 10 chapters of this book. Yet, you look at all the events that are transpiring and all the things that are working, and God's fingerprints are all over it. And here's what I want to bring out of this. In difficult times, it's easy to think, God's not there because God maybe isn't speaking directly to you, or all those things that you think that might be present. But God is present in your trouble and the things that are happening. If you look back at your history, you could see how God was there all along. One of the most loving things that has happened to me was when somebody brought to my attention to go back to some of those troubling things that happened, and to see Jesus as being there in the room, present. And those kind of moments, as you look back and you begin to see, wait, God is with me wherever I go. God was present. It begins to totally redefine the things that you have gone through. And it's, for me, that was one of the most loving things that could have happened. And I see that Jesus was there, even if I didn't fully recognize at the time that he was. Now, a fascinating thing about this book and how we're going to tie it into this between two trees actually comes from their connections of their names and some of the Hebrew names and phrases here. And so I'm not a Hebrew expert, but I want to give you the resource if you want to go there and look at more of the things. But it's from a guy named Jeremy Chance Springfield, and he has an article named Purim's Hidden Tree, Purim, Hidden Trees. And so he actually brings some of these things out, and I thought it was pretty amazing, some of the things that you can learn in the Hebrew. Now, maybe you knew this already, maybe you didn't, maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't. I'm going to take a chance here. But Esther, she had 2 names. And actually a lot of people, like Daniel had 2 names. Some of the other characters that were taken into captivity, it was pretty common for them to have a Hebrew name and a Persian or Babylonian name. So her Hebrew name was actually Hadassah, which means myrtle. I had a grandma named Myrtle, but that's no relation here. But myrtle was taken actually from the myrtle tree. Sorry, I have some of those moments. But her name is Hadassah, which means myrtle, which is taken from the myrtle tree. And we'll get back to that in a moment. Esther, which is what we know her as, it was actually a Persian name. But her name is actually Hebrew, and it has 3 of the root letters there for this word hide or conceal. So this is a Hebrew text for Hebrew people that are reading this, and they're reading her name, and they're seeing these are the words for hide or conceal. And in fact, the whole story is about her hiding her identity as a Jewish descendant, that would have actually changed and altered the story. So for her, she's placed, and the ironic thing is she's beautiful. She's attractive. She's known that she's brought into the king because she pleases him. She's very beautiful. And yet her name in the Hebrew, as it's spelled, means to hide or conceal. Okay, so there's things like this that are pretty interesting. Now, her Persian name would have probably come from a goddess, Babylonian goddess named Ishtar. So when they said Esther, they maybe thought more of Ishtar, which is a goddess of love. Now, I'm not really familiar with Babylonian mythology, but that would have been something for the culture maybe to think about, that her name was goddess of love, she's very attractive, and then she's brought up the ranks because of that. Now, this is very similar to Adam and Eve hiding themselves in the middle of the trees of the garden. They concealed their nakedness with leaves, except she's hiding not from God, but she's hiding from the Persians, and she's hiding her Jewish identity. Now, the name Hadassah comes from the myrtle tree, which is another tree of biblical importance. If you go to Leviticus and all those things, you're going to see this tree mentioned at the Festival of Tabernacles. But the thing about the myrtle tree that's significant and why it was used is actually because of its something interesting it does when it's pruned. It has an interesting reaction to being pruned. Jewish cultivators are known to actually set this myrtle tree and some of the branches on fire. Not to damage the tree, not to have lasting damage, to actually spur new and prolific growth. It's just one of those things. They burn the branches, and then that process would actually activate things that are already within that tree that'll make it more of a new and prolific growth. Now, this tree uses the experience of danger to grow and ensure new life. And I think as we're talking about threat and things that are threatening us, those can damage us, yes, if we allow fear to sever us from God, but it can also provide new and prolific growth in your life if you allow that threat to motivate you toward God. Now, Mordecai's name is actually derived from two Aramaic words, myrrh and daca, which means pure myrrh. And so we see kind of another tree here, and it's the myrrh tree. Now, the myrrh tree is biblically important because of its medicinal and healing properties. So it's something you'll see. I think it was actually gifted to Jesus, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a lot of uses for it, but it's mainly medicinal and healing properties. So we have two names here that are derived from two trees. Now, we have a myrtle tree and a myrrh tree. Now, between these two trees, we have an interesting connection with this arch-villain of Haman. He kind of fits into this in an interesting way. Now, Haman, I'm not going to go over the whole story, but just to summarize, he uses his political power to attack his enemies. And so he actually used his political power to persuade the king to issue a decree that endangered the lives of Jewish people so that he could get at this guy, Mordecai, who was disrespecting him. And so Haman builds a gallows where he plans to hang Mordecai. And this gallows is throughout this book, and it's intended to destroy Mordecai. That's kind of why it was built. But it was also to terrorize the Jewish people. It was something to kind of put a threat in their minds so that they wouldn't try to rise and fight that. And so in a real sense, this gallows put the Jewish people in a shadow of death. They saw it and they were afraid. This gallows is not a hangman's noose like we might think of, like in the old westerns that they hung people or criminals. You would think criminals. But it was a giant, more like a giant pole that was taken from a tree with all its branches cut off, and it was used to hang somebody from. Now, in the Hebrew, we've been talking about trees, and it's the Hebrew word eitz. And you're going to see that word here. In fact, it's called ha-eitz, which means the tree. So whenever it talks about this gallows, it's saying the tree, ha-eitz. Now, this is the thing that begins to appear as we begin to look through this lens of between two trees and what we've been learning the last 2 months. Now, Haman's name, if you mentioned his name, it was like saying magnificent, which I would like a name like that, magnificent. But that was what he was known as, magnificent. However, we're dealing with the Hebrew book, and so his name is actually pretty cool if you look at it as what it's spelled and what it says in Hebrew. And we see this kind of picture being woven here. And we see that this word for Haman is used in Genesis 3:11 after God finds Adam and Eve hiding in the midst of the trees. And this is what God said. He said, "Who told you that you were naked? From the tree which I commanded you to not eat from, have you eaten?" So from the tree. Now in God's question, we see this Hebrew phrase, Haman ha-etz. Haman ha-etz, which is translated from the tree. Now the Hebrew term Haman is spelled identically to this Persian name Haman, okay? It's the same kind of play on words, okay? Now don't make a doctrine out of this. Sometimes I like when I think it's new, I think it's exciting, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to place all my faith and trust in this new knowledge or whatever that I see. I learn things all the time, and it's just adding to my learning. And so think of this like increasing your tree awareness in the Bible. You're just saying, hey, there's another tree. That's another connection. And so when we see Haman's name is from in the Hebrew, and throughout Esther, he points to this tree that he's going to hang him from. We begin to see this between two trees begin to take on meaning. And we see it actually, I think, because of some numbers here. Now, it's mentioned 8 times. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is mentioned 8 times in the creation story. And this tree, this gallows, is mentioned 8 times in the book of Esther. But there's other things like that that kind of make it more of a connection. You're more than welcome to read that article I mentioned if you'd like more information. But it is this tree of death that is threatening the lives of the Jewish people. And so we see all these things happening. This Mordecai, he's trying to do something, but he's not in a position to actually enact any sort of change. In fact, Esther is in a unique position as being just a couple steps from the king to be able to say something. But in order to do that, she has to reveal her identity, and she has to risk death. And so she has to take courageous action to make sure that this doesn't happen. Now, Esther stands between 2 trees. Now, I've talked about the tree of life, and I've talked about the tree of death. And she has this tree of life. And if she just chooses this tree of life, it may mean that it costs her own life. She may be put to death if she goes to the king and acknowledges she's a Jew herself, and this needs to end. Or she could choose the tree of death, and that actually looks good and appealing. She could be almost like a goddess, second to the king, and be able to have this power and become kind of like God in that country. But it would come at the expense of Mordecai, her uncle, who raised her as an adoptive parent, and also her family. So she's queen, and she's risen like Joseph for such a time as this. And this is what makes it so cool that she makes this choice. Now, we don't have her character. That's not why she gets promoted necessarily. You could make a case for that, I guess, but it's here that we see her character really being revealed. It's Esther chapter 4, verse 16b, and she says this to Mordecai, "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So she goes in and she reveals who she really is, her hidden identity. And similarly to Joseph revealing his identity to his brothers, we see this kind of revealing herself, basically kind of being very vulnerable and in a case naked in front of the king, not physically, but vulnerability is saying, I am a Jew, and that means that I could be punished to death like the other ones that you're threatening. Now, it's almost like her saying, "Here am I." Now, we see that phrase with Noah, Abraham, Moses, and we also see it with Adam and Eve. Here am I. We're right here. We're hiding, or here am I as a response to God. And that's what she does. She says, "Here am I. I was made for such a time as this," and she acknowledges who she is. Now, the ironic thing here is Haman throughout the book is trying to find Jews to destroy. And he builds this gallows as a way to destroy God's people. Yet he doesn't recognize the Jew that is right in front of him, which is Esther, which is right side by the king. And so it's cool because God actually blinds this evil villain from finding out. So that would have destroyed the plan, right? But God had a way of getting through that. Yet it's this. We see this thing like with Esther. You can almost like the first couple chapters. You're like, it's because of her beauty. She's getting promoted. She's so she's beautiful. She's pleased the king, and she's a people pleaser. She's compliant, and she's kind of like the prototype. And this is a sexist term, but it's kind of like what the world expects of women. Be beautiful, please people, be compliant, don't stand out, wait your turn. It's all these things for her that she actually rose to the ranks. So you could draw that out. Yet within this person, we see in this kind of inside, we see this bold person, who was righteous and able to take a stand at the right moment. But all that stuff gets kind of disclosed and hidden. So when she's faced with threat, all that comes out. That character comes out, and she makes the right choice and chooses life. And this ends up saving her from Haman's tree. And Haman actually gets hung from his own tree of death. But it's a prelude to what ultimately will lead to Christ in that tree, that tree of death. And that will once for all end that curse of death on people. And so it's a cool story. It's an awesome story. You look at that and think, wow, she was made for this threat. And that's pretty cool. Now, I want to invite the worship team up, and we're going to go into a time of worship, and then we'll have a brief time of just application before we head out. A verse that was something that what Jesus said that really illustrates Esther so well, and I think also Jochebed to a point. And it comes from John 15:13, where he says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." There is a self-sacrificing to mothers everywhere, that they're willing to lay down what their desires are, what they want, and they're willing to give that up for this child and for this time that they're raising that child. And that's something we should see in this story, the stories that I've mentioned, that they were made for trouble, but they're also made for threat. And we see through them that they were able to rise up and make that right choice and to choose life. With that, would you guys...